Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 1. Samson and Gregory, two servants of the Capulets' house, get in a fight with Abram and Balthasar, two servants of the Montague house. Benvolio tries to break it up. He is a friend of the Montagues. He tries to break up their fight so that neither party gets in trouble. Tybalt challenges and fights Benvolio. Lord Capulet and Lord Montague get involved and start yelling at each other too. The Prince of Verona comes and says any more fighting will result in death. Benvolio goes and talks to his cousin Romeo, and Romeo talks about how much he is in love with this girl named Rosaline, who he has never talked to, and she does not know he exists. Act 1, Scene 2. Paris talks to Lord Capulet about marrying Juliet. Lord Capulet says Juliet is too young. He says if he wins her heart, then he will consent to them getting married. Juliet is not even 14 years old, and Paris is about probably 20, 22, something around there. Peter, a servant to the Capulet house, is given a list of names of people who are invited to a Capulet party that night. And so he can't read, so he goes to Romeo and Benvolio to read it for him, so that he can go invite the people. So since they did that for him, he invites them to the party as well. Act 1, Scene 3. Lady Capulet and nurse talk to Juliet about getting married to the man named Paris. Juliet says that she doesn't really want to get married. The nurse tells an embarrassing story several times about Juliet of when she was little, of an awkward thing that she said to her dad, and she didn't know what it meant. Juliet's mom tells her to at least try to get to know Paris before she says no to marrying him. Act 1, Scene 4. Romeo and Benvolio talk about love. Benvolio convinces Romeo to go to the Capulet party, but Romeo is only going to see if he can find Rosaline and talk to her. While on the way to the party, they talk with Mercutio and talk about Queen Mab, the fairy's midwife and the Queen of Dreams. Act 1, Scene 5. It is at the Capulet party now, and Romeo sees Juliet for the first time and instantly falls in love with her. Tybalt sees Romeo and has a hissy fit, and so he wants to go beat him up and stuff, but Lord Capulet tells him, no, calm down, this is my house and we won't have any fighting here. Romeo goes over to Juliet and plays it real smooth, and they kiss twice. Juliet leaves, and Romeo finds out that she is actually the daughter of Lord Capulet, and then Juliet comes back and Romeo is gone, so she asks the nurse who Romeo is, and the nurse tells her that Romeo is the son of Lord Montague. Act 2, Scene 1. Romeo climbs over the Capulets' wall after the end of the party to see if he can go find Juliet. His friends taunt him to try and get him to come out with all sorts of dirty jokes. Act 2, Scene 2. He sees Juliet at her window and does his long famous soliloquy about how Juliet is the east and she is the sun, or something along those lines. Juliet then does her famous soliloquy of "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" about how his name, why is his name? What is a name? What does a name matter? You could call a rose by a different name, but it would still smell just as sweet. They proclaim their love for one another, and Juliet says, if you love me, then say so, but if you think I'm easy to win over, then you're wrong. And Juliet says that she will send for Romeo the next day to see what Romeo's thoughts on marriage are, to see if he's just playing her or if he's actually serious. They say goodbye 100,000 times, and then they actually leave. Act 2, Scene 3. Friar Lawrence is talking about how everyone and everything is capable of good and evil, like flowers and herbs and people. Romeo asks the friar, he is also a priest, to marry him and Juliet that day. The friar at first is very reluctant to say yes, because just the day before, not even a full day, Romeo was over there spouting off about how much he loved Rosaline. But in the end he agrees, because he thinks that it will end the feud between the Montagues and the Capulets. Act 2, Scene 4. Romeo, Mercutio, and Benvolio are walking around, goofing around at the town center, and they are very surprised that Romeo is in such a good mood, because just the day before he was all depressed because he didn't have Rosaline. The nurse comes to get Romeo to talk to him for Juliet and to see what his intentions are. Romeo gives him his plan on marriage to the nurse, and she agrees to give Juliet the plan. The plan is that Juliet will go to Friar Lawrence's cell for confession, but really they'll actually get married. And he will give Juliet a rope ladder so that she can hang it outside of her window, and he can climb up there that night, and they can, yeah. Act 2, Scene 5. Juliet is complaining about how long it is taking the nurse to get back from talking to Romeo, and says that if she were younger, she would be a lot faster. The nurse pretends to be very, very tired and drags it out for a very long time so that she prolongs telling Juliet that Romeo would like to marry her. And so she finally does, and then the nurse tells her to go to Friar Lawrence's cell for confession, and then her and Romeo will get married. Act 2, Scene 6. Romeo and Juliet proclaim their love for each other again at Friar Lawrence's cell, and then they get married. Act 3, Scene 1. Benvolio and Mercutio are walking around. Benvolio wants to leave because it is very hot outside and he doesn't want to get into a fight. But, naturally, Mercutio was being very saucy with Tybalt when he sees him in the town square, and so they're kind of heated up at each other. Then Romeo comes, and Tybalt challenges Romeo to a duel, but Romeo's like, no, I will not fight you because I love you and I love your name just as I love my name, because he's married to Juliet, but none of them know that. And so Mercutio thinks that Tybalt has scared Romeo, and Romeo doesn't want to do it because he's scared, so Mercutio stands up, and he volunteers himself to fight Tybalt, and so they fight. Then Tybalt kills Mercutio because Romeo tried to break it up and tried to hold them off from each other, but then Tybalt, he jabbed his sword under Romeo's arm, and then that ended up killing Mercutio. So Romeo went and got revenge on Tybalt and went and killed Tybalt. And the prince found out, and the prince banished Romeo. So Romeo was then banished. Act 3, Scene 2. The nurse finds out about what happened with Romeo and Tybalt and Benvolio and Mercutio and all of them. And so the nurse goes and tells Juliet what happened. And at first she was very, very vague, and so Juliet at first thinks that it's Romeo that was killed, then she thinks it was Romeo and Tybalt, but eventually she figures it out for herself that it was Romeo who killed Tybalt. And the nurse says something very bad about Romeo, about how he's dishonest or something, and then Juliet immediately went and defended him, and Juliet is very upset that Romeo is banished. Act 3, Scene 3. Romeo is crying at Friar Lawrence's cell. He is saying death is better than banishment because he does not want to live without Juliet, so he would rather die. The friar says he is being very stupid and says to be happy for 3 reasons. He should be happy because he's alive, he should be happy because Juliet's alive, he should be happy because he's only being banished instead of killed or put to death. And so the nurse comes to the friar's cell and tells Romeo that Juliet still loves him and that he should still go and see her that night. And then Act 3, Scene 4. Lord Capulet is talking to Paris, and Lord Capulet says that he'll set up a wedding day for Paris and Juliet to get married on that Thursday, which is about 3-4 days away. So yeah, that's going to throw a wrench into a lot of plans. Act 3, Scene 5. So Romeo went and saw Juliet, and Juliet doesn't want Romeo to leave now that it's morning. She is pretending that it's still night and that it's just a meteor or something outside that's making it so bright. And then Romeo, at first he disagrees. He's like, no, I have to go. But then finally he's like, okay, fine, I'll stay. But then she's like, no, you have to go. You have to get out of here. You're going to get in trouble because it's morning. And so she's kind of being topsy-turvy. But he leaves, and she's afraid that she won't ever see him again. Lady Capulet comes in and is talking about Tybalt, and Juliet just keeps on crying and giving double-meaning answers. And so then Lady Capulet finally tells her that she's going to get married to Paris on Thursday. And Juliet says that, no, I won't do it. I won't get married to Paris. And Lord Capulet comes in and freaks out at her and calls her an ungrateful little wench for not appreciating what he's done for her, because Paris is kind of a big deal. He's just trying to make her happy, but that's not really working. Juliet goes to the nurse for advice of what to do with this whole double marriage thing, but the nurse says that she should get married to Paris because he is a better man than Romeo, and Juliet didn't like that she said that, so she doesn't really trust the nurse anymore. Act 4, Scene 1. Paris talks to the friar about getting married on Thursday. He is then jerkishly trying to get Juliet to say that she loves him, but she won't. Juliet asks the friar for help of what to do. The friar has a really big plan, which is to give Juliet a sleeping potion, so that she'll go to sleep, and it'll look like she's dead, so everyone will think that she's dead, and she'll be put down into a tomb place, but it won't be. So she'll be there, and she'll be dead, and the friar will send another guy to go give Romeo in Mantua a letter explaining all of this so that he can come and save Juliet once she wakes up from this really big sleep, and then they can go off and live happily ever after. In Act 4, Scene 2. The friar tells Juliet to go tell her father that she consents to the marriage, and so she does. And then her father is so happy that she moves up the marriage to Wednesday, which is going to throw a big wrench into all the plans. Act 4, Scene 3. Juliet is about to take the sleeping potion before her marriage, and so she's afraid to take it because of a couple reasons. She is afraid it won't work, and that she'll have to get married to Paris. She's afraid it's poison and that she's actually going to die. She's afraid that she'll wake up before Romeo gets there, and she'll suffocate in the tomb and die. She's afraid that she'll wake up, there's a bunch of ghosts and a bunch of spirits, and she'll go crazy and bash her brains in with the dead person's femur. Yeah. She eventually drinks the vial, and so she is fake dead. Act 4, Scene 4. That scene is all about getting ready for the wedding. In Act 4, Scene 5, the nurse finds Juliet dead. Act 5, Scene 1. Balthasar, Romeo's servant, tells Romeo that Juliet is dead. Balthasar doesn't know anything about the plan, so he's kind of just screwing things up. So Romeo thinks Juliet's actually dead, because he hasn't gotten the letter yet from the friar about the plan. So Romeo goes to an apothecary and gets poison to go kill himself by Juliet's side. Act 5, Scene 2. Friar Lawrence finds out that Friar John never gave Romeo the letter, and so he is really scared because the plan isn't going to fall through, so he is going to head off to the tomb early as he can so that he can stop Romeo if he's going to do anything, just make sure everything's okay, and he's going to get Juliet out of there. So, Act 5, Scene 3. Paris is crying in Juliet's tomb and won't leave after Romeo tells him to leave. And so Romeo and Paris fight, and then Romeo kills Paris, and Romeo is next to Juliet saying all this sweet stuff about her, how she looks so great for being dead when she's really not dead, which is kind of ironic. And so he drinks the poison, he dies, and then the friar goes to the tomb and finds Romeo dead, so he's a little bit late, and then Juliet wakes up, and he tells Juliet that they all need to leave, or else they're going to get in big trouble, because there's people coming. She's like, no, I can't leave him here. And so she stays, and he goes, and she grabs Romeo's dagger and kills herself next to Romeo. And then the Capulets and the Montagues find Romeo and Juliet both newly dead. And so the friar tells them all what happened, and the Capulets and the Montagues end their feud, and then everything kind of works out in the end. Yeah, that was Romeo and Juliet.